The baker's empty oven. The yeast barely stirred, a reflection of the listless apathy gripping Thomas. He ladled flour into the bowl, the mundane act offering scant comfort. Martha's humming, a counterpoint to the sifting, now echoed only in his memory. The bakery's silence had become a stifling blanket, smothering the joy that once permeated every corner. He adhered to Martha's everyday loaf, Oakhaven's 15-year staple, internalized to the point of rote. Yet the enchantment had vanished. The procedure felt like a hollow recitation. Beneath his touch, the dough felt inert. He deflated it, the escaping air a mournful exhalation. He recalled Martha's confident, capable movements, an infusion of heart that transformed the simple ingredients. His hands felt clumsy, disconnected. He shaped the loaves with mechanical precision, placing them on the sheets with exactitude, but utterly devoid of feeling. The oven, usually a warm promise, now seemed like a dark void threatening to consume him. He slid the metal trays inside, the resulting echo jarring in the stillness. The aroma, ordinarily so tempting, remained muted, almost apologetic, lacking the complex notes and subtle sweetness Martha had effortlessly drawn forth. It smelled vapid. The bell chimed, announcing the arrival of Mrs. Gable, a woman characterized by a permanent scowl and a tart tongue. A loyal patron, but brutally candid. "Morning, Thomas," she greeted, her voice raspy as stone. "Usual loaf, please." Thomas fetched one, its crust pale and lackluster. As he wrapped it in paper, his movements were drawn out and deliberate, dread filling him. Mrs. Gable accepted the offering, her eyes narrowed speculatively. She flicked it with a nail. "Feels underweight, doesn't it?" Thomas's throat tightened. "Same recipe, Mrs. Gable." She sniffed skeptically. "Doesn't possess the same fragrance. Not like Martha's." Paying with the sharp chime of coins on the counter, she added, "It's changed these last few weeks. Hope you recover your touch soon, Thomas." He mumbled a response, watching her exit. He understood perfectly. The bread had changed. He had changed. Next entered Mr. Abernathy, the retired educator, always a bastion of courtesy, his tone gentle. Even he couldn't conceal his disappointment. "Morning, Thomas. A beautiful day, wouldn't you say?" He picked up a loaf, examining it. "Something lacking, I fear. Rather insipid, perhaps." Thomas could only nod, avoiding his gaze. "I'm truly sorry, Mr. Abernathy." "It's quite all right, Thomas. These things occur. Simply needs a little more vitality." He offered a wan smile before departing, the loaf still in his grip. The complaints persisted throughout the morning, a relentless cascade of disapproval chipping away at his already fragile resolve. He offered discounts, apologies, excuses that rang hollow even to his own ears. By midday, the display shelves remained conspicuously bare, the unsold loaves mute testaments to his failing efforts. He closed the shop prematurely, the closed sign flipping with a sigh that seemed to carry the weight of his despair. Retreating to the back room, Martha's domain, where her desk and notebooks overflowed with recipes and half-formed ideas, her presence lingered, a delicate blend of lavender and flower. Settling into her chair, he traced the worn edges of the desk. A photograph of Martha, vibrant and smiling, gazed down from the wall. Her lively eyes seemed to question, "What has happened, Thomas?" He stared at the image, his heart twisting. He yearned for her laughter, her touch, her unwavering conviction. He missed her ability to imbue even the most ordinary things with magic. Reaching for one of her notebooks, his fingers trembled slightly. He leafed through the pages, seeking some clue, anything that could restore her, that could reignite the spark extinguished with her passing. He discovered a sourdough recipe, pinned in her elegant script. It was more than just instructions. It was a story, a memento of their trip to San Francisco, where they had experienced bread unlike any other. He shut the notebook, his eyes stinging. He couldn't bring himself to try. It would only amplify his sense of loss. He stood, his legs heavy. He returned to the bakery, the dormant oven looming before him, a dark mausoleum. Reaching out, he touched its cold surface, a wave of profound hopelessness engulfing him. The oven stood empty, as did he. 5 hungry faces. The metallic clang of the lock echoed in the twilight as Thomas secured the bakery door. Another day, another failure. The weight of unsold loaves felt heavier than ever, a physical manifestation of his inadequacy. He shuffled towards home, the familiar cobblestones mocking his listless steps. A small sound, like the chirping of sparrows, snagged his attention. He stopped, squinting into the dimming light. Huddled near the bakery wall, a woman and several children were barely discernible against the deepening shadows. They were a tableau of poverty, their clothes patched and faded, their faces pale. Hesitantly, they approached. The woman, who looked barely older than a girl herself, stepped forward. Her eyes, though tired, held a spark of resilience. Behind her, 5 children of varying ages clung to her skirts, their gazes fixed on the bakery windows. "Please, sir," the woman's voice was soft but clear, "we haven't eaten in 2 days. Anything you could spare." Thomas took in their gaunt faces, the too large clothes passed down through the family, the almost skeletal thinness of their limbs. His own childhood, spent scavenging for scraps in the alleyways of a grimmer district, flashed before his eyes. He knew this hunger, this gnawing emptiness that stole sleep and dignity. He looked at the smallest child, a girl with wide, pleading eyes no more than 4 years old, then back at the woman's face. He saw not just desperation, but a mother's fierce protectiveness. Something cracked within him, a fissure in the wall of grief he had so carefully constructed. "Wait here," he mumbled, his voice raspy from disuse. He fumbled with the lock, the cold metal biting into his skin. The woman and children watched him with a mixture of hope and apprehension. He pushed the door open and stepped back inside, the yeasty scent of the bakery, usually a source of pain, now a comfort. He surveyed the shelves, laden with the day's failures, crusty sourdoughs, dense rye breads, and plump rolls that had lost their shine. It was all going to waste anyway. He began piling loaves into a large woven basket he usually used for deliveries, working quickly, efficiently. The woman watched through the glass, her children murmuring amongst themselves. He returned to the doorway, hefting the basket. It was heavier than he remembered. He offered it to the woman. "Here," he said, avoiding her gaze. "Take it all." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, she seemed speechless. Then, a slow smile spread across her face, transforming her weary features. "Oh, sir, thank you," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you so much. God bless you." One of the older girls, perhaps 10 or 11, stepped forward and curtsied awkwardly. "Thank you, sir," she echoed, her voice shy but sincere. Her name must be Lily. She looked very serious. The children, emboldened by their mother's gratitude, began to murmur their thanks, their eyes shining with anticipation. He could hear their tiny voices saying bread and hungry and thank you all at once. Thomas simply nodded, unable to meet their grateful gazes. He felt a warmth spreading through him, a sensation he hadn't experienced since Martha. He pushed the thought away. The woman, whose name he hadn't even asked, began distributing the bread amongst her children. They tore at the loaves with surprising gentleness, their hunger barely concealed. The air filled with the sound of tearing crust and contented sighs. As they ate, Thomas watched them from the doorway, the basket now empty at his feet. The setting sun cast long shadows across the street, painting the scene in hues of orange and gold. He felt a strange sense of lightness, as if a small weight had been lifted from his chest. The woman caught his eye and offered a piece of bread. "Please, sir, share with us." He shook his head, a ghost of a smile playing on his lips. "No, thank you. You need it more than I do." She nodded, understanding in her eyes. "God bless you," she repeated before turning her attention back to her children. As he watched them devour the bread, Thomas felt a flicker of something long dormant within him, a sense of purpose, a connection to the world outside his grief. It was a small spark, barely visible in the gathering darkness, but it was there. And for the first time in months, he didn't feel entirely alone. The woman gathered her children, their bellies slightly fuller, their faces brighter. They offered another round of heartfelt thank yous before disappearing into the shadows, leaving Thomas standing alone in the doorway, the scent of fresh bread lingering in the air. He closed the door, the metallic clang less jarring this time. He didn't feel happy, not exactly, but he felt different. He turned towards home, his steps a little lighter, his heart a little less heavy. The cobblestones no longer seemed to mock him, but rather to guide him forward. A bargain and a broom. Usually, Thomas awoke to the ghosts of baking failures, the acrid tang of singed sugar, the mustiness of old flour. But this morning, a surprising clarity cut through the air, a bracing blend of bleach and citrus. He discovered Sarah attacking the countertop with a scrub brush, brow creased in fierce concentration. Nearby, perched on an upturned crate, Lily meticulously dusted shelves, while a younger duo, a boy and girl, waged war against dust bunnies with a broom that dwarfed them, their efforts more spirited than effective. For a breath, Thomas lingered unseen. The rhythmic whoosh of the straw bristles and Lily's softly hummed, off-key tune formed an unexpected harmony against the bakery's customary hush. Singing hadn't echoed in these walls since Martha's passing. Sarah finally noticed him, her cheeks flushed with exertion. "Mr. Baker," she greeted, a tad breathless. "Hope you don't mind. Just wanted to repay the bread." He pushed off the door frame, a curious compression in his chest. "Repay? For last night," she clarified, gesturing with the brush, scattering droplets. "We ate well, thanks to you. And I thought, a spick-and-span bakery can only draw more customers." It had never occurred to Thomas to relinquish control over his space. Martha had maintained order with an innate grace, freeing him to focus solely on the intricacies of baking. Now, the notion of another tending to his domain felt both intrusive and strangely liberating. I hadn't considered," he stammered, surprised by his own ambivalence. Sarah straightened, her gaze meeting his. Her eyes were the color of storm-laden lake waters, a steely gray that spoke of both tenacity and fatigue. "I'm a diligent worker, Mr. Baker. And my kids, well, they contribute too, in their own chaotic way." She glanced toward the children wrestling with the broom, a fond smile tugging at her lips. "We're more than just takers." Lily, catching the shift in tone, ceased her dusting and stood tall, her small hands clasped before her. She mirrored her mother's steady gaze. Thomas's eyes traveled from Sarah to Lily, then to the two younger children, their faces streaked with grime and dedication. He was reminded of his own childhood, the relentless struggle, the constant ache of hunger. That same survival instinct burned in their eyes. "All right," he conceded, the word feeling foreign on his tongue. "All right, you can clean." But, Sarah prompted, a spark of hope igniting in her voice. "But elbow grease alone won't do it," he countered, gesturing to their sparse provisions. "There's proper soap and cloths around back. And Lily, perhaps you could instruct your siblings in the proper technique?" Lily's face broke into a bright smile. "Yes, Mr. Baker." Sarah nodded, relief visibly softening her features. "Thank you, Mr. Baker. You won't be sorry." For hours, he remained a silent sentinel in his own shop, watching them work. Sarah conquered the oven, her movements economical and practiced. Lily, with infinite patience, guided her younger siblings, demonstrating the art of sweeping, gathering dust into manageable heaps. He observed Lily pause to wipe flour from her little brother's cheek or retie her sister's laces. She was more than a child. She was a miniature matriarch, a natural caregiver. Thomas found himself deeply touched by their earnestness. He had anticipated a disastrous, half-hearted attempt, followed by demands for more food. Instead, he witnessed quiet resolve, an authentic desire to earn their keep. As the morning wore on, the bakery metamorphosed. The grimy windows now unveiled sunlight, illuminating the motes of dust suspended in the bright beams. Gleaming countertops replaced dingy surfaces, The floors seemed to shine. The air, once permeated with the odor of past failures, now carried the suggestion of possibility. By midday, the bakery possessed a level of cleanliness it hadn't known in ages, perhaps ever. Sarah stepped back, examining their handiwork with a satisfied exhalation. "There," she announced, wiping her forehead with a grimy hand. "Good as new." Thomas ambled around, running his hands over the surfaces, breathing in the revitalized air. He had to concede, she was right. The space felt different, lighter, more welcoming. He cleared his throat, the sound amplified in the cleaner space. "You've done good work," he offered, the words feeling insufficient. Sarah offered a smile. "Thank you, Mr. Baker." He hesitated, then plunged his hand into his pocket, pulling out a clutch of coins. "This is for your efforts." Sarah's smile wavered. "Oh no, Mr. Baker. We weren't expecting—" "Take it," he insisted, pressing the coins into her palm. "You earned it." He grappled for words, a struggle he hadn't faced so acutely before Martha's passing. Silence had been easier. "And, if you're willing, I could use your assistance again tomorrow." Sarah's eyes widened in surprise. Truly, Thomas affirmed, a faint smile finally parting his own lips. "Perhaps you could even impart a cleaning tip or two to me." Lily glowed, and even the youngest children briefly abandoned their play to flash grins. As Sarah and her children departed, Thomas stood in the doorway, watching them disappear down the lane. The bakery felt strangely vacant without their presence, yet it was a different kind of emptiness than he had grown accustomed to. It was an emptiness expectant, filled with the faintest glimmer of hope. He was still a solitary widower wrestling with hardships, but perhaps, just perhaps, he was no longer quite so alone. The taste of home. The ghost of lemon cleaner lingered in the air, a crisp counterpoint to the burgeoning yeast. Thomas observed Sarah, brow creased in concentration, as she attacked the display cases. Even the most tenacious grease seemed to yield before her determined scrub. The children, God love them, buffed the brass door handle to a radiant shine. So, Thomas ventured, kneading the dough with an unexpected surge of energy. About these new recipes. He hadn't intended to sound doubtful, but the words emerged slightly stilted. Sarah straightened, swiping her hands on her apron. "Just simple comforts, Mr. Baker. Things that resonate. My grandmother swore an apple pie could mend almost anything." A rusty chuckle escaped him. "Apple pie, eh? Haven't baked one of those in ages." Martha's domain, those pies had been. He hadn't dared trespass since her passing. "And cookies," piped up young Lily, eyes gleaming. "Grandma's chocolate chip were legendary." "Undeniably good," Sarah agreed with a smile. "Effortless to make, too. And perhaps a simple sugar cookie, festively decorated for the children. Something to brighten their day." Thomas pondered. He'd always been a purist. Sourdough, rye, the occasional baguette. Elaborate pastries were Martha's forte, and he hadn't seen the need for anything more. Yet, gazing at Sarah's hopeful countenance, at the children's bright anticipation, a flicker of curiosity stirred within him. "All right," he conceded, startling himself. "We'll attempt the apple pie. And the cookies. But," he added, raising a flour-dusted hand, "the bread remains my domain." Sarah's face lit up. "Naturally, Mr. Baker. You're the master there." The following morning, the sweet perfume of cinnamon and baking apples danced with the familiar tang of sourdough. Under Sarah's patient guidance, Thomas had conjured a respectable-looking pie from the oven. Simple rounds of chocolate chip and sugar cookies cooled on a wire rack, their enticing aroma beckoning customers even before opening time. Mrs. Gable, a regular partial to plain rye, peered into the display case. "Apple pie? Thomas, I haven't seen you bake one of these in years. What's the occasion?" He shrugged, feigning nonchalance. "Just trying something different, Mrs. Gable." She purchased a slice, took a bite, and her eyes fluttered shut. "Good heavens," she breathed. "This tastes like childhood, just like my mother's." The news spread like wildfire. By lunchtime, the bakery buzzed with a vibrant energy. Patrons queued for slices of apple pie, their faces illuminating with each mouthful. The cookies vanished as rapidly as Sarah could produce them, consumed with gusto by children and adults alike. Even the sourdough seemed to possess an enhanced flavor, infused with the bakery's newfound vitality. From behind the counter, Thomas observed the scene, a peculiar warmth blossoming within him. He watched a young boy, no older than 8, meticulously devouring a sugar cookie, his face radiating pure delight. He saw Mrs. Gable, her eyes glistening as she savored her pie, a memory resurrected with each delicious bite. He glanced at Sarah, expertly managing the burgeoning crowd, her smile unwavering. The children, faces flushed with exertion and pride, assisted with bagging cookies and wiping tables. They were all contributing, and Thomas felt a swell of gratitude. That evening, after Sarah and the children had departed, Thomas stood alone in the quiet bakery, the silence amplifying the day's significance. The shelves were almost empty, a testament to their achievements. He ran a hand over the cool countertop, feeling the residual warmth of the oven. He hadn't felt so invigorated in years. Martha's absence persisted, a gaping void that would likely never mend completely. Yet, he recognized that the edges of that void were beginning to soften. The sharp, piercing pain was gradually, almost imperceptibly, mellowing into a more bearable sorrow. He reflected on Sarah, her strength and unwavering optimism. He thought of the children, their enthusiasm, their innocent joy. They had reignited a spark within him, providing a reason to rise each morning, a purpose beyond mere routine. He picked up a lone chocolate chip cookie, the last survivor of the day's batch. He bit into it, the sweet, familiar flavor coating his tongue. It wasn't merely a cookie, he realized. It was a taste of belonging, a taste of hope blooming, a taste of renewal. And for the first time in what felt like forever, Thomas Baker allowed himself to contemplate that maybe, just maybe, things would be all right. Uneasy credit. The man's tweed jacket looked wildly out of place amidst the flour dust and gingham tablecloths. He wrote furiously in a small notebook, pausing only to take another bite of Sarah's apple pie. Thomas watched him from behind the counter, a knot forming in his stomach. He hadn't seen a food critic in, well, he couldn't remember the last time. Extraordinary, the critic finally declared, setting down his fork. Homely, in the best possible sense. It tastes like a memory. He looked directly at Thomas, his eyes crinkling at the corners. You've tapped into something special here, Mr. Baker. Thomas mumbled a thank you, unsure what to say. Homely? He hadn't thought about the taste of his baking in weeks, let alone considered its emotional resonance. The newspaper review appeared 2 days later, splashed across the local food section. Baker's Bliss, a taste of nostalgia, the headline proclaimed. The article raved about the apple pie, the chocolate chip cookies, even the sourdough, which Thomas had been making the same way for 20 years, received a glowing mention. Business boomed. Customers lined up down the block, eager to sample the taste of nostalgia. Thomas, Sarah, and even the older Miller children worked tirelessly, kneading, baking, and serving with a frantic energy that had been absent for far too long. The aroma of warm apples, cinnamon, and yeast filled the air, a fragrant shield against the lingering scent of loss. One afternoon, amidst the chaos, a smartly dressed woman in a power suit approached Thomas. She introduced herself as a representative from a local investment firm. Mr. Baker, she said, her voice crisp and efficient, we've been following your recent success with great interest. We believe Baker's Bliss has the potential for significant expansion. We'd like to offer you a substantial loan to open a second location. Thomas stared at her, dumbfounded. A second location? He hadn't even considered the possibility. He glanced over at Sarah, who was patiently explaining the difference between a sugar cookie and a snickerdoodle to a wide-eyed child. He thought of the Miller children, their laughter echoing through the bakery, their small hands helping to decorate cookies. I don't know what to say, he stammered, feeling a strange mix of excitement and unease. The woman smiled, a practiced, professional smile. Think about it, Mr. Baker. With our investment, you could replicate this success across the city. Baker's Bliss could become a household name. She handed him a sleek, embossed card. Call me when you're ready to discuss the details. That night, after the last customer had left and the bakery was finally quiet, Thomas sat alone, the investment firm's card heavy in his hand. The idea of expanding, of seeing Baker's Bliss flourish, was undeniably appealing. But something felt wrong. He looked around the bakery, at the mismatched chairs, the worn wooden floors, the faint flour dust that clung to every surface. It was Sarah's apple pie, her cookies, her warmth, and her children's laughter that had drawn people in, not some brilliant business strategy on his part. The homely taste the critic praised wasn't just the ingredients. It was the love and care Sarah poured into every batch. He watched Sarah, her face illuminated by the soft glow of the kitchen light, teaching her youngest daughter, Lily, how to roll out dough. Lily giggled, her small hands covered in flour, a smear of dough on her cheek. Sarah smiled, her eyes filled with a tenderness that reminded Thomas achingly of Martha. He felt a sharp pang of guilt. He hadn't created this resurgence. Sarah had. And now he was about to accept credit and potentially a loan based on that credit for something that wasn't solely his. The thought felt like a betrayal, not just of Sarah, but of the spirit that now filled the bakery. He rose and walked into the kitchen. Sarah looked up, her smile warm and genuine. "Everything all right, Thomas?" He swallowed hard, the words catching in his throat. "Sarah," he began, unsure how to express the turmoil in his heart. About this offer to expand. He trailed off, unable to articulate the conflict raging within him. How could he possibly take all the credit when it was their combined effort, their shared purpose, that had brought Baker's Bliss back to life? And how could he explain that to a woman who had already given him so much? Secrets in the shadows. The bakery throbbed with an unfamiliar vitality, a world away from the tranquil solitude Thomas had known. Sarah, bobbing her head to the radio, manipulated the dough with practiced ease, a rhythmic ballet of flour and water. Even little Leo, typically a shadow glued to Lily, gleefully smeared frosting across cookies in a show of helpfulness. Despite the lively atmosphere, a disquieting feeling simmered in Thomas. The loan still hung over him, its weight considerable. But there was something else, too, a subtle undercurrent suggesting Sarah held secrets. He'd noticed her consistent refusals of rides, her odd insistence on walking home with the children. Generous offers of additional pay were met with hesitation. Finally, curiosity gnawed at him. As the day ended, he surreptitiously observed Sarah and her children depart. Waiting a calculated few moments, he trailed them, keeping a careful distance. They followed the main thoroughfare before veering onto a dusty track leading away from town, past the dwindling houses and into open fields. Thomas frowned. Where were they headed? He idled his truck, twin beams of light slicing through the encroaching gloom. Then he saw it, an ancient, decrepit school bus nestled within a cluster of trees, nearly swallowed by shadows. Its once yellow exterior was weathered and cracked, suggesting abandonment. But as Sarah and the children drew near, a soft glow emanated from within. Thomas stilled the engine, a wave of realization dawning on him. He watched, heart heavy as they boarded. Guilt flooded him. He had been so consumed by his own worries, so self-absorbed, that he hadn't entertained the notion that they might be without a home. The image of the bus became etched in his memory. Sleep eluded him that night, haunted by visions of the children huddled together, seeking warmth in that cramped, cold space. The following morning, Lily was absent. Sarah's usual light had dimmed, replaced by an aura of exhaustion. "Lily's not feeling well," she murmured, avoiding his eyes. "Just a little cold, I think." But as hours passed, Sarah's anxiety grew, her glances darting repeatedly to the clock, her movements becoming increasingly erratic. At last, during a quiet spell, Thomas approached her. "Sarah, is everything okay? You seem troubled." She hesitated, then expelled a long breath. "Lily's gotten worse. She's running a fever, and her cough is awful. I don't know what to do. I don't have the money for a doctor." A wave of remorse crashed over Thomas, followed by a fierce protectiveness. "We need to get her to a doctor right away." He grabbed his keys. "Come on, let's go." Feeble protests arose, but Thomas brushed them aside. He ushered her into his truck, his mind reeling with possibilities. She guided him back along the dirt path, her voice strained with worry. When they reached the bus, Thomas ducked inside. The air hung heavy with the combined sense of dampness and age. In the back, Lily was curled up under a meager blanket, her face flushed and her breathing labored. Leo sat beside her, his eyes wide with apprehension. The other children remained silent, their young faces mirroring concern. Thomas gently touched Lily's forehead, finding it radiating heat. "We need to get her to the hospital," he said with urgency. He carefully lifted Lily into his arms, surprised by how fragile she felt. As he carried her out, he saw the mingled fear and gratitude shining in Sarah's eyes. "Thank you, Thomas," she breathed, her voice thick with emotion. He drove with a newfound urgency, his hands tight on the wheel. He glanced down at Lily, her pallid complexion stark against his arm, and a knot of dread formed in his chest. He couldn't diagnose her ailment, but he knew medical intervention was crucial. He had to do something. The bakery, the loan application, the looming inspection, all receded, becoming insignificant. At this moment, the only thing that mattered was Lily's well-being. Truth in the air. The hospital room buzzed with the sterile drone of overhead lights, a stark contrast to the palpable warmth radiating from a slumbering Lily. The doctor, her face etched with fatigue, gestured for Thomas to join her in the corridor. "Mr. Baker," she said, her tone hushed with concern, "Lily's going to recover. It's a bad cold, no doubt compounded by less than ideal living conditions." A knot tightened in Thomas's gut, confirming his suspicions. And Sarah? She appeared so stressed. The doctor exhaled softly. "Sarah's an extraordinary woman. Though she hasn't disclosed much, it's clear she's carrying a heavy load. A single mother of 5, living on the outskirts of town in a repurposed school bus, as I understand. The situation is precarious, Mr. Baker. They've endured a lot." The unspoken hardships hung in the air, thick and heavy. He pictured the cramped bus, a hive of activity, the relentless battle for warmth, nourishment, and simple comfort. He recalled Martha and the haven she had created, their home a sanctuary of love and unwavering support. Sarah and her children possessed none of that security. Empathy, a feeling dormant since Martha's passing, flooded his senses. He had been so absorbed in his own sorrow, so blinded by personal challenges, that he had overlooked Sarah's quiet strength, her fierce spirit. "Her husband?" Thomas inquired, compelled to understand her struggle. The doctor hesitated. "He deserted them a year ago, simply vanished. No support, no explanation. She's been struggling to stay afloat ever since." A surge of anger, a protective impulse he hadn't anticipated, welled up within him. How could anyone abandon their family so heartlessly? He recalled Sarah's unwavering optimism, her tireless dedication, the fierce devotion she showered on her children. Admiration blossomed within him. She was a survivor, a force of nature. He returned to Lily's room, his gaze settling on Sarah, asleep in the chair by her daughter's bedside. Her face, usually so vibrant, was now pale, the worry lines deeply etched. He draped a thin hospital blanket over her. He reflected on the bakery, the countless hours Sarah had poured into it, the exquisite pastries she crafted, the joy she had resurrected. He contemplated the lie he had allowed to fester, the misappropriated accolades, the unspoken agreement to let others believe he was the sole architect of the bakery's renaissance. He couldn't continue the charade. He wouldn't. Silently, he slipped from the room and into the sterile brightness of the lobby. Spotting a payphone, a relic of a bygone era, gathering dust, he dug for spare change. The radio interview from weeks earlier flashed in his mind. The praise he'd soaked up, the spotlight he'd hogged, while Sarah remained hidden in the shadows. He punched in the station's number, his hand trembling slightly. Each ring reverberated with anticipation, a prelude to a moment of reckoning. WKVA, You're on the air. A cheerful voice chirped. This is Thomas Baker, he stated, his voice surprisingly firm. From Baker's Delight. A momentary pause, then a burst of enthusiasm. Mr. Baker, what a pleasure. How can we help you? He inhaled deeply. I need to correct something I said during my last interview. I need to tell the truth about Baker's Delight. The cheerful tone wavered. Correct something? Is everything all right, Mr. Baker? Everything is about to be, Thomas replied, resolve hardening his gaze. I want to set the record straight. I want everyone to know who is truly responsible for the bakery's success. It's not me. He paused, gathering his strength, bracing himself for the fallout. It's Sarah Miller, he declared, his voice ringing with conviction, and her incredible family. A cookbook and a community. The aftermath of Thomas's radio confession was a whirlwind. The phone lines at WLOC lit up like a Christmas tree, calls flooding in from across the county. People offered Sarah jobs, childcare, even a used minivan. One woman offered to pay for Lily's medical bills outright. Thomas sat beside Sarah in the small studio, watching her face as the kindness poured in. He'd expected anger, maybe resentment, but instead, tears streamed down her cheeks, a mixture of relief and disbelief. I don't know what to say, Sarah choked out, her voice thick with emotion. Thank you. Thank you to everyone. The radio host, a man named Jerry with a booming voice and an even bigger heart, leaned forward. We have a Mrs. Eleanor Ainsworth on line 3, Sarah. She says she has something special for you. Sarah took a deep breath and nodded. Jerry patched the call through. Hello, Sarah? A frail voice crackled through the speakers. My dear, I heard your story on the radio. Your grandmother was Mary, wasn't she? Mary Olson? Sarah gasped. Yes, ma'am, she was. Did you know her? Know her? Honey, I practically grew up on her pies. Mary and I were best friends as girls. She had a way with apples, that woman did. And I recognized that crust of yours anywhere. There was a pause, a rustling sound, and then, I have something of hers, something she gave me years ago. A cookbook. All her recipes, scribbled in her own hand. I think it belongs with you now. Sarah's eyes widened. A cookbook? With her recipes? Oh, Mrs. Ainsworth. Nonsense, dear. It's yours. I'll have my grandson bring it over to the bakery this afternoon. It's time those recipes brought joy to another generation. The line went dead. Sarah sat stunned, tears flowing freely now. Thomas put a comforting hand on her shoulder. That afternoon, a young man, clearly Eleanor Ainsworth's grandson, arrived at the bakery bearing a worn, leather-bound book. The cover was faded, the pages brittle, but the scent of cinnamon and nutmeg seemed to emanate from it. Sarah accepted it reverently, her fingers tracing the faded ink of her grandmother's handwriting. Inside were not just apple pie recipes, but dozens of others. Breads, cakes, cookies, all infused with the love and warmth that Sarah remembered so vividly from her childhood. The effect on the bakery was immediate and profound. With the cookbook as her guide, Sarah began to experiment, resurrecting forgotten recipes and adding her own creative twists. The aroma of Grandma Mary's gingerbread filled the air, drawing customers in from blocks away. The bakery, already thriving, exploded in popularity. Orders poured in, not just for pies, but for everything Sarah baked. The local newspaper ran a feature story, highlighting Sarah's talent and Thomas's generosity. One evening, after a particularly busy day, Thomas sat at one of the small tables, watching Sarah clean the countertop. The warm glow of the setting sun streamed through the windows, illuminating the flour dust that clung to her hair like a halo. Sarah, he said, his voice unusually firm. This is more than I ever imagined. You brought this place back to life. And you brought me back to life, too. Sarah stopped cleaning and looked at him, her eyes questioning. It's not right, Thomas continued, his gaze fixed on his hands. For me to take all the credit. This bakery, it's not just mine anymore. It's yours, too. You deserve to be recognized for what you've done. He took a deep breath, his heart pounding in his chest. I want you to be my partner, Sarah. 50-50. We'll run this place together. What do you say? Sarah stared at him, speechless. The offer was so unexpected, so generous, that she couldn't quite grasp it. Partner? With Thomas? It was beyond anything she had ever dreamed of. Thomas, she finally said, her voice trembling. I don't know what to say. Are you sure? I mean, I don't have any money to invest. Thomas shook his head, a rare smile gracing his lips. Your talent is investment enough, Sarah, more than enough. He stood up and extended his hand. Sarah hesitated for a moment, then reached out and took it. Her hand was small and calloused, but her grip was strong. Thank you, Thomas, she said, her eyes shining with gratitude. I would be honored to be your partner. As their hands clasped, a sense of hope filled the bakery, a feeling as warm and comforting as a freshly baked pie. The future was still uncertain, but one thing was clear. Together, Thomas and Sarah, with their shared passion and their unwavering belief in the power of community, could overcome any challenge that came their way. The aroma of baking bread filled the air, a promise of good things to come. A new family, a full table. The antiquated school bus, rechristened the Yellow Submarine by Lily, stubbornly occupied Thomas's backyard. Peeling paint and corroded metal were hardly the stuff of Sarah's domestic dreams. Yet, she possessed an indomitable spirit, mirrored, surprisingly, by Thomas's revitalized vigor. A forgotten melody danced on his lips as he wrestled out the worn seats, the acrid scent of rust a constant companion. Sarah, wielding a pry bar and even fiercer resolve, tackled the rotting floorboards. Lily, ever pragmatic, meticulously sorted the reclaimed fragments, salvageable planks, scrap iron, undiscovered gems. Even young Mikey, usually adrift in his own world, earnestly scrubbed the grime-coated windows with a soapy cloth, his small face a study in concentration. You know, Thomas remarked, mopping his brow, I haven't exerted myself like this since Martha and I first swung open the bakery doors. Sarah looked up, her hand pausing on the tool. It's doing you good, Thomas. Blowing out the dust bunnies. A chuckle escaped him, lighter than it had been in ages. Dust bunnies? More like a tenant convention of arachnids up there. Days dissolved into a symphony of hammering, sawing, and painting. Thomas unearthed a latent talent for carpentry, fashioning bunk beds from the repurposed lumber. Sarah, blessed with an intuitive eye, spun cast-off drapes into vibrant window dressings. Lily, spending her hard-earned allowance, acquired a small sunflower in a pot, placing it on the narrow sill. The alteration proved transformative. The Yellow Submarine, once a stark reminder of Sarah's predicament, morphed into a refuge, a testament to their joint efforts. As the final layer dried, and the last valance was hung, Sarah lingered in the doorway, her gaze shimmering with impending tears. It's beyond perfect, she breathed. The children, eyes wide with wonder, explored their novel dwelling. Mikey staked his claim on the top bunk, proclaiming it his personal fortress. Lily carefully arranged her modest possessions on a petite shelf. Even baby Rose seemed to intuit the shift, gurgling with delight as Sarah nestled her into a makeshift cot. Observing them, a knot tightened in Thomas's throat. He hadn't fully grasped what he was creating. This wasn't merely shelter for Sarah and her brood. It was the genesis of a new family, needed from flowery aspirations and shared visions. Thanksgiving dawned, crisp and burnished. The bakery, typically shuttered on holidays, throbbed with industry. Thomas, Sarah, and Lily collaborated seamlessly, preparing a banquet to nourish not just their expanding family, but the community as well. The savory perfume of roasting fowl mingled with the comforting essence of Sarah's apple pie, now officially branded Sarah's famous apple pie on the bakery's chalkboard. Tables groaned under the weight of mashed potatoes, cranberry relish, green bean casserole, and a colorful assortment of other contributions, each a gift from a neighbor or friend. As guests arrived, the bakery resonated with laughter and camaraderie. Old Mrs. Henderson, her eyes twinkling mischievously, sampled Sarah's pie, pronouncing it superior to my own, and that's saying something. Mr. Abernathy, the notoriously taciturn proprietor of the hardware emporium, stunned everyone by gifting a bouquet of sunflowers, a silent declaration of support for Sarah. Thomas observed from behind the counter, his heart overflowing with a warmth he hadn't felt since Martha's passing. Sarah, cheeks rosy with contentment, circulated through the throng, greeting each individual with a luminous smile. Lily, shedding her shyness, assisted in serving the food, her quiet self-assurance radiating outward. Mikey, surprisingly, captivated the children's table, spinning fantastical tales of his castle in the upper bunk. Later, as the celebration waned and the last well-wishers departed, Thomas found himself alone with Sarah, tidying the leftovers of the feast. The bakery, typically hushed and empty at this hour, still vibrated with echoes of mirth and conversation. "Thank you, Thomas," Sarah whispered, her gaze locking with his. "For everything." He shrugged, self-consciously. "It's nothing. You deserve it all. More than deserve it." Lily chimed in, overhearing them. "You've made us a family, Thomas." He regarded them, Sarah's weary yet joyful countenance, Lily's sincere expression, and recognized the truth in their words. He had provided them with a home, but they had bestowed upon him something far more precious, a reason to awaken each morning, a reason to find joy, a reason to embrace hope. A genuine smile illuminated his features. "Happy Thanksgiving," he rasped, his voice thick with emotion. "To our new family." As they strolled toward the bus, nestled a short distance from the bakery, Thomas experienced a tranquility he hadn't believed possible. The yellow submarine, bathed in the gentle glow of the bakery lights, resembled less a discarded vehicle and more a shining testament to the fresh existence they were crafting together, one delectable slice, one securely driven nail, one shared moment of laughter at a time. The abundantly spread table, the hearts overflowing with gratitude, were harbingers of a future far more lavish and rewarding than he could have previously conceived.